When the searchers finally reached the tent in February 1959, it was still pitched on the open slope, half buried in drifted snow. Inside were 9 packs, 9 pairs of boots, warm coats, and food laid out for a meal that was never eaten. The long slashes in the canvas had been made from the inside. 9 experienced hikers had cut their way out of their only shelter and walked into a night of 25 below, most of them in socks, some barefoot. None of them survived. The question that has kept this file open for 60 years was never how they died. It is why they ran. Welcome to the strange Casebook. The file in front of me tonight comes from the Northern Ural mountains of the Soviet Union, and it may be the most theorized case in this entire casebook. It has been blamed on missiles, on secret police, and on monsters. As always, I will give you the record, not the rumors. And this time, the record has an ending almost no one saw coming. On the 23rd of January, 1959, 10 young skiers left the city of Sverdlovsk, most of them students and graduates of the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student with a reputation for careful planning. The plan was a 300-kilometer winter crossing to a remote peak called Otorten, a route of the highest difficulty grade the Soviet system recognized. These were not tourists. On the 28th of January, at the last inhabited outpost, the 10th member, Yuri Yudin, was forced to turn back. His joints had flared up, and he could not continue. He said goodbye to his 9 friends at the edge of the wilderness, and he would spend the rest of his life as the one who turned around. We know the days that followed from the group's own cameras and diaries. They show a strong team in good spirits, breaking trail through deep snow. The last usable frames from the 1st of February show them in driving wind, cutting a flat platform into a snow slope for the tent. That slope was the bare shoulder of a mountain the local Mansi people knew by a name often translated as Dead Mountain. The forest, with its firewood and its shelter, lay a mile below. Dyatlov chose the open slope anyway, most likely to keep their hard-won height for the next day's push. They dug in, pitched the tent, and settled for the night. It was the last decision the record can fully see. Dyatlov had promised a telegram when the group reached the nearest village, expected around the 12th of February. The 12th came and went. At first, no one worried. Winter routes run late. But the silence stretched, and by the 20th, there were search parties in the mountains, then soldiers, then aircraft. On the 26th of February, searchers found the tent. It sat on the open slope, poles up, half buried. Inside, in order, were the group's boots, their warm clothing, their food, their diaries, their money. And when the canvas was examined, a seamstress spotted it first, and the forensic laboratory confirmed it. The cuts ran from within. In the middle of the night, someone had slashed their way out of shelter rather than use the door. Below the tent, the snow held one more piece of the record. 8 or 9 sets of footprints led away downhill, left by feet in socks, by bare feet, by one foot in a single felt boot. The prints were calm, spaced like people walking together, not sprinting. They ran down toward the tree line for half a kilometer, and then the snow swallowed them. At the forest edge, a mile from the tent, under a tall cedar, the searchers found the remains of a small fire. Beside it lay the first 2 hikers, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, in their underwear. Above them, the cedar's branches were snapped off to a height of 5 meters. Someone had climbed again and again, perhaps looking for the tent in the dark, while freezing beside a fire too small to save them. Over the following days, 3 more were found on the slope between the cedar and the tent. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Rustam Slobodin. They lay hundreds of meters apart, in a line, faces toward the camp. All 5 were ruled to have died of hypothermia. These 3 died climbing back up, into the wind, toward everything they had abandoned. 4 hikers were still missing. It took 2 more months to find them. In early May, as the snow began to rot, searchers' probes struck something in a ravine 75 meters beyond the cedar, under 4 meters of snow. There was a hollow, a den, floored with cut branches. And there were the last 4. Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolovatov, and Nikolai Thibault-Brignol. Some were dressed in clothing cut from the bodies of the friends who had died first at the cedar. The living had taken what the dead no longer needed, and kept trying. It was the autopsies that turned a tragedy into a mystery. Nikolai's skull was fractured. Ludmila and Semyon had chests full of broken ribs, crushed, in the examiner's words, by a force comparable to a car crash. And yet the bodies showed almost no external wounds. Whatever had broken them left none of the marks a club, a fall, or a fist should leave. Then came the details that would feed 60 years of midnight theories. Lyudmila's tongue and eyes were gone. Semyon's eyes as well. A routine test found traces of radiation on a few items of clothing. And at the funerals, relatives noticed the skin of the dead had turned a strange brownish orange. The Soviet inquest closed the case that same May with a sentence that explained nothing and admitted everything. The 9 had died, it said, from a compelling natural force they were unable to overcome. The files went to the archive, and the pass where they died came in time to carry Dyatlov's name. Into that official silence, the theories poured. So let us hold each one up against the record. attack by anyone fails on the snow itself. The only footprints on that slope belonged to the hikers. Their money and valuables sat untouched in the tent, and the local Mansi hunters, briefly suspected, were among the first out searching for them. Nothing in the file suggests another living soul on that mountain. Secret weapons tests fail on the timeline. Glowing orbs really were reported over the Urals that winter, but the sightings documented in the case file came weeks after the night of the tragedy, and they match rocket launches from ranges far to the south. No debris, no burns, no blast damage was ever found at the site, and the wilder candidates, panic induced by wind-driven infrasound, or a creature out of the forest, exist nowhere in the case file at all. The infrasound idea cannot be tested, and no animal left a single track. Which brings us to the explanation everyone reached first and everyone abandoned: an avalanche. Here is the problem. The slope above the tent measured only about 23 degrees, well below the steepness avalanches are supposed to need. The searchers found no avalanche debris. The tent poles were still standing, and the snow had held for some 9 hours after the hikers cut into it. For 60 years, that was the impasse. The avalanche that could not have happened on the night 9 people fled from something. In 2019, Russian prosecutors reopened the case, and in 2020, they announced an answer: an avalanche, with poor visibility sealing the group's fate. Many dismissed it because it came with no physics. The how was still missing. It arrived a year later from Switzerland. In January 2021, 2 engineers, Johann Gaume and Alexander Puzrin, published a study in a nature research journal that finally made the numbers work. Their model runs on a chain of small, invisible things. The hikers' cut in the slope left a short wall of snow resting on a buried, weak, sugar-like layer. That night, a katabatic wind, cold air pouring downhill like water, quietly loaded more snow above the tent in the dark. Their equations put the failure point hours after the cut was made, and when it failed, it did not take the mountain with it. A slab of snow, perhaps 5 meters long, dropped onto the tent and onto sleeping people pinned against a rigid floor of skis and bedding. To test what that would do to a human chest, they turned to an unlikely archive: old crash test data, gathered by car makers to study impacts on the body. The result matched the autopsies with unsettling precision. Ribs and skulls broken by a heavy, blunt weight. Severe, but not instantly fatal. No external wounds. Even their snow simulation had a strange pedigree, built on code first developed to animate the snow in the film Frozen. And with that, the night finally plays out in order. Sometime after midnight, the slab strikes the tent, injuring some of the 9. In a howling wind, in total darkness, fearing a larger slide is coming, they cut their way out and do the disciplined thing. Get everyone to the tree line, make fire, dig in, survive until light. But the cold is faster.
2 die at the cedar. 3 die walking back for the tent. 4, sheltering in the ravine with their injuries, are buried where they lie. A compelling natural force, after all.
Honesty requires the ledger to be complete, so here is what remains. The radiation traces most likely have an ordinary source, contaminated work clothing, since at least one of the group worked in the nuclear industry. But the file does not settle it. The missing eyes and tongue are what months in a snow-fed stream, decay, and scavengers do, say the forensic reviews. The orange skin is frost and mummification, not the mark of anything stranger. And the scientists themselves refuse the word proof. A plausible mechanism, they call it. Though when they returned to those mountains in the years after, their cameras caught slab avalanches breaking on slopes just like that one. So this may be the rare file in the casebook that is almost ready to close, not with a monster, and not with a conspiracy, but with snow, wind, gravity, and 9 people who did nearly everything right. Before you go, sit with the decision they faced, because it is crueler than any theory. The tent held everything needed to survive, and leaving it killed them. Staying, with the slope above already broken once, might have killed them too. Tell me below, in the small hours, injured, blind in the wind, would you have stayed? The record, at last, seems to have its answer. The mountain keeps the rest. I will see you at the next. If you'd like to sit with more cases like this, subscribe. The file stays open